Good morning, and welcome to my talk about why stories are important. I'd like to thank the Parent Teacher Association with the school for sponsoring this talk. Let's talk parent to parent on this, as we all know how important our children are to us. We want to instill in them faith in Jesus Christ and great values to support that and set them up for a life where they can pursue what they feel that God is calling them to do and to do it successfully. Good stories can help with these goals. On the flip side, bad stories can make it harder. In a world where storytelling comes to the printed page, TV screens, and device screens, it's critical that we as parents help our kids with that. Let's talk about what imaginative literature is. That's the topic of this conversation. It's not just a story or fiction. Instead, it's a kind of story that encourages the consumer of the story to use their imagination to understand not just the obvious meanings of the story, the plot, the characters, etc., but also to make connections with deeper meanings of the world, mankind's place in it, the nature of God, just to name a few. But let's dive deeper. What's imagination itself? Holly Ordway on page 22 of Apologetics and the Christian Imagination describes it as the human faculty that assimilates sensory data into images upon which the intellect can then act. It's the basis of all reasoned thought, as well as artistic, or what we would call imaginative exercise. End quote. This is an important point she makes, the basis of reasoned thought. Why? Later on in the same page, she makes the connection. First, your senses watching, reading, listening, things like that, take the story in. Your imagination unpacks it into something you can grapple with, and then your reason determines what that means. But without the mediation that imagination provides, your reason wouldn't be able to make sense of anything. It, quote unquote, cannot deal with the raw perceptions of the world. You need to have meaning. It's all about inspiring through the use of their imagination, the connections to the profound truths of life, the ideas that make us who we are. I'm talking about the big topics, virtue and sin, sacrifice, beauty and truth, even the big one, death. J.R.R. Tolkien, in his essay on fairy stories, makes this point on page 88. The peculiar quality of the joy in successful fantasy can be thus explained as a sudden glimpse of the underlying reality or truth. End quote. This is what makes a great story great, allowing the reader an opportunity to make these connections. In some ways, it's like putting down a trail of breadcrumbs that they can follow. It's explicit, but in others, it's more like walking through a forest. After a while, you start seeing the paths the animals take. But to do that, you need to become really absorbed with your surroundings and accept the complexity around you on an almost subconscious level. With the written word, which I'd argue is the most potent of the storytelling mediums, how do the authors help the reader make those connections with unfamiliar ideas? One key way is through the use of metaphors. Simply put, it's drawing upon the familiar to shed light on the potentially unfamiliar. Jesus Christ himself was famous for the use of metaphor and simile in in the gospel to illuminate truths such as what is heaven, what is faith, and many others, so that his listeners could be drawn in and encouraged to make the connections themselves, sometimes in a really profound way. So with imaginative literature, let me give you a few examples of a couple examples of what I mean by these connections. So this is from page 137 of Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. So Oyarsa is talking to one of the characters, and Weston So the Yarsa says, strange, you do not love any one of your race, but you would let me kill ransom. You do not love the mind or your race, nor the body. Any kind of creature will please you if only it is begotten by your kind as they now are. It seems to me, thick one, that what you really love is no completed creature, but the very seed itself. That's all that's left. Then Weston comes back with, tell him that I don't pretend to be a metaphysician. I have not come here to chop logic. If he can understand, as apparently you can't either, anything so fundamental as a man's loyalty to humanity, I can't make him understand it. So Oyarsa comes back with, I see now how the Lord of the silent world has bent you. There are laws that all who knew you know, a pity and straight dealing and shame and the like. And one of these is called the love of kindred. He has taught you to break all of them except this one, which is not one of the greatest laws. This one he has bent till it becomes folly and has set it up, thus bent, to be a little blind Ayarsa in your brain. And now you can do nothing but obey it. Though if we ask you why it is the law, you give no other reason for it other than all the other and greater laws which drive you to disobey. Do you know why he's done this? And it goes on. But the point is that this calls to mind the love of neighbor, right? Um, which is a key law from God. And where it makes you think of really where that law, that commandment lies within the other laws, like love of God. Um, so it's an invitation for the reader to consider the personal Christian priorities and how even things on the surface can be seen good can be warped, especially when pursued in isolation of other important things. Consider focusing on work, right, to provide your family. This is a good thing, right? But if you do that in isolation to everything else and go into the workaholic zones, this can be destructive for your family, your spouse, and your children. Let me read from the same author, C.S. Lewis, but this from Paralandria. So in this, Ransom is talking to the Green Lady, and he says, I am older now. Your world has no roof, the roof being a layer of clouds that she can't see the stars or the moons. Your world has no roof. You look right out into the high place and you see the great dance with your own eyes. You live always in that terror and that delight, and what we must only believe you can behold. Is not this a wonderful invention of Maladril's? When I was young, I could imagine no beauty but this of our own world, but he can think of all and all different. And so it goes on to Ransom talking about how things are different and bewildering about it. And the green woman goes on to answer Ransom's question about how does he know about his role being older. And she says, Maleldil is telling me, answered the woman. Okay, so telling her in her mind, right? So what does this draw the reader to do? Um, I mean, the Green Lady obviously is a close analog to Eve, our first mother from humanity, right? And in this case, it draws the reader to think about what might have been. Like she has the preternatural gifts. She has the closeness to God, the point that God speaks to her in her mind. She has the closeness to animals, the communion with nature. These are things that we believe that Adam and Eve had as well before the fall. So it kind of imagines what might have been if that wouldn't have taken place. And then that can also lead to the consideration of original sin, um, and this doctrine, the trusting God, obedience. It continues from there. Now, I've given examples from C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, but both of these great authors were part of a larger group in Oxford in the early mid 20th century called the Inklings, where they grapple with the challenges of the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and utilitarianism in Christian scholarship. J. Lennon George Williams, in his journal article, The Flame of the West, he quotes C.S. Lewis. Quote, For the power of man to make himself what he pleases means that we have seen the power of some men make other men what they please, end quote. Think about this. This is a warning of what it means to reduce education to learning facts and processes to drive the progress of scientific society, and only that. Now, in doing so, we run the risk of losing our souls and connections to our past, and ultimately, the truth and meaning as well. Great imaginative literature helps cure this. So, if you want some ideas about what you might recommend your kids, read yourself, of course, or read with your kids, here's some obvious ones. A couple of these we talked about today: C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia and the Space Trilogy, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, the Harry Potter series, S.M. Sterling's The Change series, Stephen R. Donaldson's The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, and Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archives. These are all great, great series, deeply embedded in fantasy and imaginative literature, um, and many, many great ideas can be pulled out of them if you're open to it. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a safe drive home and read your kids tonight. Bye.